Alright, so now we have the configuration ready for our framework, the custom configurations. As you can see here, we have the elements, we have the element collections, and we have this custom section as well. So everything is right now available, and the last thing which we need to do is to call this particular custom configuration within our framework. So how are we going to do that? Very simple. Just go to the hooks, and within this hooks we have a hooks.initialize.cs file. And as you can see that we have all this initialization happening for our framework within this initialize setting method, as you already know that. So I'm just going to go to this particular method, and within this we have something called a set framework settings method. And this method is responsible for reading the XML file configurations from the global config.xml file. So as I already said, we are really going to be deprecating this particular piece of code from this particular configuration section. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment this piece of code, but still I'm going to be using the same name instead of breaking the whole thing that we have did so far. And this is really not going to be breaking anything in the framework for now, because we are just going to be removing some of the bad codes or the old legacy code, and we're going to use some of the new technology here, right? And you can see that these codes are going to be reminding the same thing. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste it over here, and the population of the properties is going to be remaining the same, but the way we are going to read the informations from the app.config file is going to be changing, which is going to be from our own custom configuration. So I'm just going to delete that. So for reading the AUT, the application under test, from the app.config file, how are we going to do that? So we already know that our EA test configuration is going to be responsible for reading the test settings, and within test settings we actually can pass the index to read the application under test. And for doing that, we are going to be doing something like this. We are going to call the EA test configuration over here, and you just have to hit control dot, because this is going to be something which is not referenced within this particular configurator.cs file. So I'm just going to add that. And then we have something called as EA settings, and this is the EA settings that we added just before our video in here, this particular class right in here. So I'm just going to call that, so EA test EA settings, and within this EA settings we have something called as test settings. And this test setting is something which we wrote again, and here we have to pass the types. This types is nothing but the types that we have: the name, staging, pre-prod, or production. So I'm just going to pass that staging first time, and if I hit dot, you can see we'll get all the AUT browsers and islog, and similarly we have this name, test type, everything, right? Everything comes up automatically. So I'm just going to select the AUT, right? So easy it is. So this time I'm actually getting the application under test from the configuration using this particular piece of code. Similarly, I can get the build name, but the build name is something which is not available within our settings. I would leave this for you as a homework. You can do it by yourself, which is pretty straightforward and simple, and again it's going to be hands-on for you as well. So I'm just going to comment this particular piece of code for now. Similarly, the test type, again the test type is something which we have already available, it is written, so you can just paste it over here. Just you have to change this to test type, right? Similarly for the islog, you can just do this islog, and similarly for is reporting, you can change this to is, oops, we don't really have any reporting, so I'm just going to leave this for you as a homework again. And the log path, of course we have one, so this is going to be the log path. Similarly for the app connection, we seriously don't have any setting for this as well, so I'm just going to leave this as a homework for you again. And similarly for the browser type, I'm actually going to make use of our existing code, pretty much exactly the same thing like this, but for this particular value I'm just going to change it to the browser type, which is the browser, right? So this is gonna be it. And you can see there is one more important thing which is piece missing. I'm hard coding the settings here, something like staging. right? And you can ask me, how can we resolve this? Because we have different kinds of setting for different environments like staging, production, pre-prod. How are we going to resolve this? Very simple. You can actually pass the framework setting information from here, something like setting type, and within this particular setting type you can pass in from your hook initialize. Over here you can just pass it, and this method will eventually pass to this particular configurator and it will pass it over here. So you can change this to setting type instead of staging's hard-coded value, and then you can perform the operation. Again, I'm going to leave this for you because these are something just pretty straightforward and simple, and again it's up to you how you customize this framework. So I'm not really going to test that piece of line for now, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. I'm just going to save it right now. And now if I just want to execute this particular piece of code, you will see there will be some error. So you can see the build will be succeeded, but if I try to run this particular piece of code, you will see some weird error which is really not understandable for the first time. And if you see this, it says that the configuration system failed to initialize, and it doesn't really tell you what is that, and it says that it is unrecognized configuration section. And of course it makes little sense in Visual Studio 2017 at least, that it says that it is unrecognized configuration section, and it is really true, because we have a EA test configuration within this app config over here for the EA test config, and we have not told to Visual Studio this particular project that this particular section is actually of our own custom section, and only if we tell to this Visual Studio it will actually make sense. So for that, guys, stay tuned for our next video to resolve this issue and also bringing this whole code that we have written to life.